You wake up again. The room is still. Too still. The kind of stillness that presses against your ribs like a held breath. Your sheets are warm, but they feel wrong, like flesh that remembers every failure. You run your fingers across the pillow, and even that feels accusatory. The softness is not comfort. It is guilt, dressed as mercy. You're not safe here. You never were. They told you that your feelings made you human, that your trembling, your tenderness, your ache to be seen was proof of a soul. But the world outside your window doesn't believe in souls. It believes in masks, in noise, in silence, masquerading as strength. And so you learn to bury it, all of it. You learn to swallow grief like glass. But some part of you still asks, why does it hurt to feel? Why does the mirror flinch when you cry? They called it strength, sensitivity, empathy, as if being open was some kind of light. But light attracts teeth. And somewhere beneath the smiling philosophies and sugar-coated affirmations, you began to suspect the truth. You were not praised for your softness. You were watched, measured, weighed, and then punished. Your emotions, they were never sacred. They were studied, tested, manipulated, not by monsters, but by those who claimed to love you. Your tears weren't held. They were used. Your silence was not peace. It was compliance. Nietzsche once said, man is something to be overcome. But you were taught to overcome nothing, just to kneel, to smile while unraveling. So tell me, what if your vulnerability isn't proof of your humanity? What if it's your leash? They told you your softness was yours. They told you your guilt was born from your own heart. But the truth is quieter, more surgical. It was planted. Long before you spoke your first word, a chorus of whispers crawled under your skin, pressing lullabies into your marrow, lullabies with blades tucked beneath their notes. You didn't choose this trembling. You inherited it. This is what Nietzsche called the herd. Not a gathering of beasts, but of ghosts, each one kneeling, each one wrapped in the same tender chains. Compassion, guilt, remorse. They were never purely virtues. They were permissions. Instructions, a manual for obedience written in the blood of centuries. You were taught to feel for others only when it served the crowd. You were taught to despise yourself when you stepped outside its rhythm. The herd morality lives in the tone of your apologies, in the way your stomach twists when you dare to say no. It lives in the voice that says, you must forgive, you must comply, you must bow or be cast out into the cold. You call it conscience, but it is conditioning. It's not kindness, but control. It is the invisible leash that keeps you circling the same corral, mistaking fear for virtue. And as you lie there in the dim light of your room, you begin to feel it tightening, not just inside you, but everywhere. The softness you thought was yours is the softness of millions, breathing the same second-hand shame. But the cruelty of it has only begun to show. Kindness is not always kindness. Sometimes it's a mask stretched over a wound, stitched tight so no one sees the infection underneath. Sometimes it's a tactic, a trembling shield held up not to protect others, but to protect yourself. From judgment, from power, from being seen for what you really are. You start to see it everywhere. In the eyes of the teacher who praised you, after breaking you. In the hand on your shoulder, warm and shaking, that only touches you to remind you who holds forgiveness. In the kind smile of a priest who smells your sin and forgives you only to feel superior. There's nothing selfless in that grin, only hunger. Only the soft, quiet domination of one who feeds off your shame. Empathy, you were told, is what makes us human. But what if empathy is just another performance? A gentler way to climb, to rule, to rewrite someone's pain in your own image. To say, I understand when you don't. But saying it makes you feel like God. Real emotion doesn't look like this. Real compassion doesn't whisper like a knife. The weak learned to be kind, so the strong wouldn't crush them. They learned to weep for others, because rage was too dangerous. They learned to hug, to pray, to smile, to survive. But kindness like that isn't virtue. It's camouflage, and the most dangerous kindness is the kind that expects something in return. To lead you must see clearly, and to see clearly, You must feel less. Emotion to the powerful is fog. It blurs the edges of the blade. It softens the blow that must be struck. It makes corpses look like tragedies instead of necessities. But the world isn't moved by tears, it's moved by force. History is not written by those who feel too much. It is carved by those who feel just enough to lie, and not enough to flinch. You begin to understand what Nietzsche saw, that pity is not virtue. It is decay, a softness that spreads like mold through the pillars of strength. The Übermensch, the one who ascends, who does not kneel, cannot afford such rot. He steps over the weeping not because he is cruel, but because he must. He refuses to drown in the emotions of the herd, because if he did, he would stop, and if he stopped, he would break. The truly powerful do not cry for the weak. They endure them, they manage them, they use them, or they erase them, not out of malice, but clarity. So you ask yourself, can you lead and still feel pity? Can you rule and still feel sorrow? Or must pity die before power can live? The answer festers in the silence, in the part of you that flinched once, but flinches less now, because clarity is coming, and with it, the death of softness. You've clung to your pain like a relic, like proof that you feel more deeply than others, that your suffering makes you wise, that the wounds across your spirit are sacred, a testament to your depth. But what if it's not depth? What if it's just performance? Nietzsche saw through it, this theater of agony. He knew that most pain doesn't elevate. It inflates. It swells the ego until it disguises itself as insight, until the broken begin to believe they are prophets, until shame becomes a kind of stage, and bleeding becomes applause. You tell yourself the sorrow means something, that you're closer to truth because you've suffered. But how much of that belief is comfort? How much of it is survival wrapped in vanity? How many tears were shed not from grief, but from needing to be seen? It's a bitter confession, but somewhere in the dark you felt it, the temptation to hurt louder, to collapse more beautifully. Because if your suffering has no meaning, then what was it all for? You've worn your trauma like a crown of thorns, hoping it makes you holy, but pain does not sanctify, it distorts. And sometimes it deceives you into thinking your scars make you special, when all they've made you is quiet and afraid. Not all suffering is profound. Not all agony is noble. Sometimes it's just the echo of a self trying desperately to be important. They told you to express yourself, but not too much, and never without an audience. In this world, even your sadness must be presentable. Cropped, filtered, captioned. Your tears are content, your breakdown a story arc. Grief becomes a currency. The more poetic, the more profitable. What once was buried in silence is now broadcast in soft tones, set to music, packaged for consumption. Society does not suppress emotion, it sells it. It wraps despair in aesthetics. Pain becomes palatable, beautiful even. The trembling becomes a trend. Hashtagged, shared, monetized. Vulnerability is now performance, not expression but exhibition. Your suffering must follow structure. Your trauma must be digestible. It must be inspirational. And if it isn't, if it's raw and messy and unmarketable, it is ignored. This is not freedom. This is theater. Nietzsche saw the rot coming. Culture, he warned, would become spectacle, where truth is drowned beneath performance. And now we live it. A world where confession is currency, where outrage is orchestrated, where we cry not to release, but to be seen crying. You're not allowed to feel unless it makes someone else feel something too. And so emotion becomes product. Your soul becomes brand. And the only acceptable despair is the kind that looks good in grayscale. But what happens when the show ends? What happens when the mask of curated sadness cracks and there's nothing underneath but noise? What happens when you no longer remember the difference between feeling and performing? Pity isn't love, it wears the same face, soft eyes, gentle words, but beneath that smile it hides a parasite, a hunger dressed as mercy. Nietzsche warned us, pity poisons strength. It seeps into the bones and rots dignity from the inside. When you accept pity, you surrender. You lower yourself not just to receive help, but to be controlled, to be diminished. The one who pities stands above. They look down with a smirk, cloaked in kindness. Their compassion is a leash, invisible but unbreakable. It binds you to weakness, to dependency, to silence. They forgive you, but only so they can feel superior. They console you, but only so you owe them your gratitude. They smile, but it's a smile sharpened with power, a smile that says, I am the savior and you are the fallen. Compassion becomes a weapon, not of the heart but of hierarchy, and you, caught in its grasp, start to believe that to be pitied is to be loved. But love does not humiliate. Love does not wound beneath the surface. Pity is a cage disguised as a gift. It is a slow collapse disguised in tenderness, and when you finally see it for what it is, the parasite feeding on your shame, the question remains, will you break free, or will you wear the chains forever, smiling through the quiet poison? You thought your guilt was yours, pure, personal, unshakable, but guilt is a ghost born not from your soul, but from a long history of chains. Nietzsche called it slave morality, a doctrine forged in the shadows by the weak to tame the strong. A morality built on pity, on meekness, on submission, disguised as virtue. It was never about goodness. It was about control. The powerful were too wild, too untamed, too dangerous. So the herd invented a weapon sharper than any blade, a weapon that cut deeper, guilt. Guilt that wraps itself around your heart like iron, binding you to obedience. Guilt that whispers, you must suffer, you must atone, you must kneel, and you listened, because to reject it was to risk exile, ruin, loneliness. To live outside the herd's morality was to become invisible, hunted by eyes that see only weakness and rebellion. This guilt is not just a feeling, it is a cage. You are not its prisoner by chance. You are complicit each time you apologize for being yourself. Each time you swallow your truth to avoid conflict. Each time you carry shame like a mantle, instead of shedding it like armor, you forge your own chains. The herd doesn't just bind bodies, it enslaves souls. And in that silence, you begin to see the truth. The cruelty you fear is not outside, it lives within. Your crib was a coffin with lullabies. From your first breath, the songs that cradled you were not gentle promises. They were warnings, soft melodies wrapped around iron bars, sweet voices humming the rules you must never break. Love was tangled with silence. Comfort was stitched with fear. You were born into chains you couldn't see. Every tear you shed was measured. Every scream softened. Your emotions were shaped, twisted, not to free you, but to fit you into a mold. A mold passed down like a curse from mother to child, father to daughter, generation to generation. The hands that held you also bound you. The lullabies promised safety, but only delivered captivity. You learned to bury pieces of yourself beneath the weight of expectations, to mute the parts of you that screamed for truth, to swallow the wildness in your blood so the world could breathe easier. And with each passing day, the person you were meant to be began to erode. Identity is not born whole here. It is chipped away, fragment by fragment, until you're nothing but hollow echoes of obedience. The child within you is both prisoner and ghost, and as the chains tighten, you realize the deepest wound is not outside, it is inside. This is not just a societal trap, it is a generational curse, a slow death of self. And from this dark beginning, the nightmare only deepens. Who are you without your pain? Strip it away. The heartbreak, the shame, the betrayals you've recited like prayers. What remains? Do you even know? Or have your wounds become your reflection, the only face you recognize in the mirror? You have built a self out of fractures. Every scar a brick, every story a plea. Look at me. I've suffered. I matter. Your life has become a monument to what was done to you, not what you are. But what if that monument is a mask? What if your pain isn't just your cage, but your costume? The truth sits heavy. Pain is seductive. It makes you legible. It makes you sympathetic. It makes people stop, listen, touch your arm. It gives you a shape when everything else feels formless. It says, this is who you are. But it's a lie, because pain isn't identity. It's a season, a shadow, a wound that should close, but you keep reopening because you're afraid of disappearing without it. Afraid of being ordinary. Afraid of being unseen. What would you be without your story? Without the eyes it draws? Without the pity it buys? Would you still exist if no one watched you bleed? Beneath the mask of suffering, there is someone waiting, but they are silent, trembling, unknown. And maybe that is the truest fear. Not the loss of pain, but the loss of self when pain is gone. They lied to you about monsters, not the ones with claws or fangs, but the ones cloaked in human skin, quiet, patient, relentless. Real power doesn't roar. It doesn't shout or break things in rage. It whispers, soft, cold, and clear. A voice that slips beneath your defenses like a shadow folding into the dark. It commands without mercy. It demands without explanation. And you feel it, pulling at the edges of your soul. You are drawn to it even as you recoil. This power is not flashy. It is the stillness before the storm. The silence in the room when everyone else is screaming. It does not need to be seen to be felt. It lives in control of yourself, of others, of the world's sharp edges. They told you to fear power, to hide from it. But now the truth seduces you. Power is freedom. The freedom to feel less, to want less, to break away from the chains of softness that have bound you. But power demands a price. It demands you kill what you love, the tenderness, the pity, the weakness. To survive, you must become the thing you feared. You stand at the edge, torn, between disgust and desire, between the cage of your pain and the cold call of dominion, and the whisper grows louder. Will you answer? Peel the flesh of virtue from your bones. Strip away the thin, delicate skin of goodness you've worn like armor. The prayers, the promises, the endless need to be seen as kind, as pure, as innocent. Watch it hang loose, bloody and raw, dripping away with every desperate grasp to hold on. Stand raw before the mirror. See yourself without the soft lies that have shielded you. No mask of mercy, no cloak of compassion, just bare bone and blood and trembling truth. It will burn. The world has taught you to fear this moment, to believe that without your moral self-image, you are nothing. But that image is a cage. A delicate corpse dressed in light, rotting from the inside out. You must die to who you thought you were, not to become cruel or cold, but to become free. This is the fracture where transformation begins, where pain fractures the self, and something new can grow in the ruin. You will feel the sting of loss, the ache of emptiness, the terror of seeing yourself without the stories you clung to, but in this void, there is potential, because only when you stand naked, stripped of virtue's flesh, can you begin to shape who you really are. No longer a mask, no longer a prisoner, but something else, waiting, ready. Bury the child, not a literal grave, but a ritual one, a hole carved deep into the soil of your own memory. Lower into it the trembling hands, the pleading eyes, the voice that once begged to be understood. Cover it with earth. Do not whisper a prayer. This is not a funeral. This is an execution. Burn the diary. Watch every page curl, blacken, collapse into ash. Every confession, every soft word written to justify your suffering, gone. The smoke stings your eyes, but you do not look away. You've fed enough of your life to ghosts. You've written enough apologies for simply existing. Let the fire eat them. Let it eat you. Kill the witness. The part of you that keeps watching, waiting for approval. The quiet observer who judges your every move, begging the world to forgive you. Take it by the throat, end it. It is not your friend. It is the leash you carry in your own hands. This is not the death of your body. It is the death of weakness, the slow strangling of innocence, the tearing down of a house built entirely from shame and fear. When it is done, there is no applause, no comfort, only silence. A silence that feels like a wound, but also like a beginning. Because in that silence, something darker and clearer rises from the ash, not a victim, not a supplicant, but something unbound. And now, there is no turning back. After the fire, what remains is not joy, nor is it peace. It is clarity, a cold, sharp clarity that cuts through the haze of longing and pain. A clarity that does not soften or soothe. It does not promise comfort or forgiveness. It simply is. This is amor fati, the love of fate, to embrace everything you once fought against, the cruelty, the indifference, the endless chaos of existence, to see the world not as a place that owes you mercy, but as a relentless force, and to say, yes, not because you have no choice, but because freedom lives in acceptance, to stop resisting the storm, and instead become the storm's quiet eye. It is not nihilism. It is not surrender. It is rebellion, the fiercest kind, the kind that no longer begs for meaning or justice, the kind that finds strength in the abyss. You are no longer bound by the weight of what should be. You are free because you have made peace with what is cold, unforgiving, but yours. And in that truth, there is power, quiet, unyielding, and finally, liberation. Real power does not apologize. It does not stammer, does not justify, does not tremble behind fragile words. It stands unyielding, unapologetic, unmoving. Nietzsche called it the will to overcome, not to submit. The strong do not ask for permission. They do not seek approval or forgiveness. They carve their path through silence and scorn, unafraid to shatter what others hold sacred. Love, kindness, acceptance. These are luxuries for the weak, for the powerful. They are chains waiting to be broken. So ask yourself now, in the quiet dread of your own reflection, are you willing to lose love to gain power? To trade the soft touch of belonging for the cold grip of command? To silence the part of you that begs to be seen, to held, to forgiven? Power demands sacrifice. It demands that you kill the part of yourself that pleads and pleases. It demands that you stand alone, stripped of comfort, stripped of consolation. This is the crucible of becoming, the unbearable choice between fading into mercy or rising through fire. No one else will decide for you. Will you surrender your heart to the herd? Or will you claim your strength, even if it means walking through darkness, unloving, unforgiven, but free? The question hangs heavy, and only you can answer. You don't need to be understood, not really. The price of independence is loneliness, a cold companion that settles deep in your bones, chilling every whispered hope for connection. It creeps in like fog, thick and suffocating, blurring the faces of those who once promised to stay. Rejection follows like a shadow, sharp-edged, relentless. The nods of approval you once craved fall silent. The smiles vanish. The doors close softly, one by one. Alienation becomes your new skin. You move through the world like a ghost, visible but unseen, present but untouchable. And yet Nietzsche whispers in the quiet spaces between your breaths, greatness was never meant to be embraced by the herd. The herd fears what it cannot tame. It casts out the wild, the different, the fierce. It condemns those who refuse to kneel to its rules. Independence is a solitary road paved with silence and scorn, but it is also the path to something far beyond comfort, to become what others fear, to live unbound by their chains, to be free, not because you are loved, but because you are untouchable. This is the brutal truth whispered by the night. To stand alone is to stand tall. To be misunderstood is to be alive. And in that harsh solitude, you find your strength, because some souls are born not to belong, but to transcend. You no longer cry. The tears have dried up like blood on cracked stone. You no longer beg for mercy or understanding. The voice inside that once trembled with fear is silent, swallowed by steel. Now you only smile, a smile that does not reach the eyes. A smile forged in shadow, cold, calculated, unyielding. You have become the monster they warned you about, not because you hunted others, but because the darkness you fled now lives inside you. The soft self, The one who once sought comfort, who bled from wounds both seen and unseen, is dead. In its place, power reigns. But power is no gift. It is a curse, disguised as strength. You wear your armor like a second skin, impenetrable and isolating. The price of mastery is the loss of innocence, the death of vulnerability, the sacrifice of connection. You have transcended weakness, but at what cost? The monster within watches, patient and hungry. It whispers that compassion is a lie, that empathy is a weakness. It tells you to silence your past, to bury the child who once needed love. You have become both predator and prisoner of your own making, and in this mirrored hell, you ask yourself, is this power worth the price of your soul? Because sometimes the greatest monster is not outside, it is the one you carry inside. He who fights with monsters must take care, because in the endless battle, the line between hunter and hunted blurs. The mirror before you no longer reflects the face you knew. It shows something else, something colder, sharper and unfamiliar. You see the eyes of a stranger staring back, eyes that have seen too much, felt too little. The monster you chased outside now breathes within. Its breath fogs the glass, distorting your gaze. You wonder, was the fight worth this loss? Have you become the darkness you swore to destroy? The weight of what you've become presses down, heavy as iron chains. No longer a victim, no longer a child, not quite a savior, but something else, broken, fierce, and alone. This is the price of transformation, the cost paid in shattered reflections and silenced tears. And as you stare into that fractured image, one truth remains: the battle is not over, because the monster within never sleeps, and neither can you. You remember softness, the quiet warmth of a hand held without question, the fragile pulse of love that once breathed life into your bones. The tears you shed, so many tears, each one a release, a confession, a silent scream into the void. They are gone now, replaced by steel and silence. The cold certainty of power's price. You wonder, was it worth it? Was trading tenderness for strength truly freedom? Or just another kind of cage, made not of flesh but of stone? The loneliness presses in like a thick fog, heavy and relentless. It wraps around your heart, squeezing until every beat feels like a betrayal. You ache for what you lost, the innocence, the hope, the softness that made you human. But those parts are buried deep beneath the rubble of your becoming, and beneath it all lies a question. Sharp and unforgiving, did you become what you feared or what you needed to survive? There is no answer, only the echo of memories that no longer belong to you. The mirror holds your gaze, cold, unyielding, and you see yourself, fractured and whole all at once. In this silence, you understand, power is not salvation. It is a wound that never heals. And love is the ghost that haunts its edges. You can't unsee what's been shown. The truth burns itself into your retina, searing past the edges of forgetting. It lingers in the corners of your vision. In the silence between your breaths, you can't unknow the weight of what you've uncovered, the fragile lies, the cruel bargains, the cages hidden beneath kindness. The door to comfort is closed. Behind it lies the warmth you once craved, the soft illusions that sheltered you. But that door no longer opens. You stand now in the ashes of what was once your home. The walls charred black, the air thick with smoke and memory. Each step forward is heavy, deliberate, a slow walk through ruin. The silence echoes like a wound, raw and aching. You feel the loss in your bones, the absence of innocence, the fading light of safety. There is no turning back, no retreat to the soft lies, only this path. Cold, lonely, unforgiving, but also true. You carry the burden of knowledge, and with it, a strange kind of freedom, because once the flames have burned away the shadows, what remains is unmasked, and you, whoever you are now, must face what's left without comfort, without mercy, only the stark, haunting clarity of what is. Nietzsche never promised happiness. He promised truth, and truth is a cruel companion. It strips away the comforting lies, exposes every fracture, every wound you tried to hide. Power is not a destination. It is a burden, a weight that settles heavy on your shoulders, bending your spine beneath its relentless pressure. It demands solitude, the cold loneliness of those who walk alone, unyielding and unclaimed. To carry power, you must endure the silence that follows the loss of love. You must bear the isolation that comes when others turn away. Afraid of the light you wield, it is not triumph, not glory. It is endurance, a long, endless endurance of shadow and fire. Only those who can bear this weight without breaking can claim what others call strength. And even then, strength is never free. It exacts a toll, a price paid in fragments of the soul left behind. So tally the cost, count the losses, measure the silence. Because in this cruel truth lies the bitterest lesson. Power is not a gift. It is a burden meant only for those who can carry it through the coldest nights, and in that unbearable loneliness, they find their true selves, unbroken, unapologetic, and utterly alone. You were born into chains, cradled by whispers that bound your soul before you even knew to speak. Those chains, soft as lullabies, sharp as blades, wrapped around your bones, shaping every breath you took, but somewhere in the darkness, you learned to walk without them, not free, never free, just unshackled enough to stand alone. The world still presses against you. Cold and indifferent, the weight remains, though lighter now. A ghost dragging at your heels. You carry the scars of submission and revolt intertwined. You carry the silence of those who never asked to be caged. And as you move forward, you wonder, have you gained strength? Or have you lost everything that once made you human? The answer is hidden in the quiet spaces between your heartbeats. In the shadow of your own reflection, you are hollow. Yes, but also awake. And in that fragile awakening lies a truth darker than any chain. Sometimes, to be free, you must become the very thing you feared. And freedom is not a victory. It is a question, a lingering doubt, a wound that never fully heals. You were born into chains. But now, you walk alone, and the night watches, always watching.